الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. أشهد أن عليا ولي الله وأشهد أن عليا حجة الله صلوات وسلامه عليه. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير عمل حي على خير عمل قد قام
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. تبارك الذي بيده الملك وهو على كل شيء قدير. الذي خلق الموت والحياة ليبلوكم أيكم أحسن عملا وهو العزيز الغفور. الذي خلق 7 سماوات طباقا ما ترى في خلق الرحمن من تفاوت فارجع البصر هل ترى من فطور ثم ارجع البصر كرتين ينقلب إليك البصر خاسئا وهو حسير. ولقد زينا السماء الدنيا بمصابيها وجعلناها رجوما للشياطين وأعتدنا لهم عذاب السعير. وللذين كفروا بربهم عذاب جهنم وبئس المصير. إذا ألقوا فيها سمعوا لها شهيقا وهي تفور تكاد تميز من الغيظ كلما ألقي فيها فوج سألهم خزنتها ألم يأتكم نذير قالوا بلى قد جاءنا نذير فكذبنا وقلنا ما نزل الله من شيء إن أنتم إلا في ضلال كبير. وقالوا لو كنا نسمع أو نعقل ما كنا في أصحاب السعير فاعترفوا بذنبهم فسحقا لأصحاب السعير. إن الذين يخشون ربهم بالغيب لهم مغفرة وأجر كبير. وأسروا قولكم أو اجهروا به إنه عليم بذات الصدور. ألا يعلم من خلق وهو اللطيف الخبير. هو الذي جعل لكم الأرض ذلولا فامشوا في مناكبها وكلوا من رزقه وإليه النشور. أأمنتم من في السماء أن يخسف بكم الأرض فإذا هي تمور أم أمنتم من في السماء أن يرسل عليكم حاصبا فستعلمون كيف نذير. ولقد كذب الذين من قبلهم فكيف كان نكير. أولم يروا إلى الطير فوقهم صافات ويكبن ما يمسكهن إلا الرحمن إنه بكل شيء بصير. أمن هذا الذي هو جند لكم ينصركم من دون الرحمن إن الكافرون إلا في غرور. أمن هذا الذي يرزقكم إن أمسك رزقه بل لجوا في عتو ونفور. أفمن يمشي مكبا على وجهه أهدى أمن يمشي سويا على صراط مستقيم. قل هو الذي أنشأكم وجعل لكم السمع والأبصار والأفئدة قليلا ما تشكرون. قل هو الذي ذرأكم في الأرض وإليه تحشرون. ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين. قل إنما العلم عند الله وإنما أنا نذير مبين. فلما رأوه زلفة سيئت وجوه الذين كفروا وقيل هذا الذي كنتم به تدعون قل أرأيتم إن أهلكني الله ومن معي أو رحمنا فمن يجير الكافرين من عذاب أليم قل هو الرحمن آمنا به وعليه توكلنا فستعلمون من هو في ضلال مبين قل أرأيتم إن أصبح ماؤكم غورا فمن يأتيكم بماء معين صدق الله العلي العظيم.
محمد وآل محمد صلوات. آج بھی کی آتی ہے صدا بائی، آج بھی کی آتی ہے صدا بائی حسین، تیرا چہرہ تیری آنکھیں بھول کب پائی حسین، آج بھی زینب کی آتی ہے صدا بائی حسین، چلتے نا کے سے گرایا خود کو جلتی ریت پر، چلتے نا کے سے گرایا خود کو جلتی ریت پر، گھٹنیوں کے بل میں تیری لاش تک آئی حسین، آج بھی زینب کی آتی ہے صدا بائی حسین، بس میں گھبرائی تھی خنجر تجھ پہ چلتا دیکھ کر، بس میں گھبرائی تھی خنجر تجھ پہ چلتا دیکھ کر، پھر کسی مشکل میں گر کر میں نہ گھبرائی حسین، آج بھی زینب کی آتی ہے صدا بائی حسین، کون تھا جو مرنے والوں میں نہیں تھا خوبرو، کون تھا جو مرنے والوں میں نہیں تھا خوبرو، بولنے مٹی تو کس کس کی نہ یاد آئی حسین، آج بھی زینب کی آتی ہے صدا بائی حسین، ہاتھ میں کوزے لیے سب آسماں تکتے رہے، ہاتھ میں کوزے لیے سب آسماں تکتے رہے، ابر نے ایک بوند پانی کی نہ برسائی حسین، آج بھی زینب کی آتی ہے صدا بائی حسین، دور افتادہ سفر سے لوٹ کر میں نے نوید، دور افتادہ سفر سے لوٹ کر میں نے نوید، ٹھنڈا پانی جب پیا بس تیری یاد آئی حسین، آج بھی زینب کی آتی ہے صدا بائی حسین، تیرا چہرہ تیری آنکھیں بھول کب پائی حسین، آج بھی زینب کی آتی ہے صدا بائی حسین، آج بھی زینب کی آتی ہے صدا بائی حسین، محمد و آل محمد صلوات۔
Our guest speaker, Sheikh Anwar Jaffer, dear elders, brothers and sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Surah Fatiha is requested for all marhumin listed on the screen, as well as all other marhumin. Surah Al-Mubarak Al-Fatiha. Dua Shafa Maries is requested for all those who are in need here and elsewhere. Let us recite together. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. أَمَّن يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ 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 أَمَّن يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ. Ya Allah. The Muharram and Safar Fund is still open. Please see Brother Abbas Alu or Brother Sibtain Yusuf Ali in the men's side, or Sister Fatima Abdul Hussein in the sisters' side to make a donation. You may also use the QR code displayed on the screen in order to donate. I'd now like to call up Brother Hussein Jaffer to say a few words, after which we'll have majlis by Sheikh Anwar Jaffer. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Our Ahlul Bayt have narrated that prayers is what angels love, prayer is the practice of our prophets, prayer is the light of understanding, prayer is what makes faith strong, prayer is what makes actions accepted, prayers is what increases our rizq, prayers is what protects you from illness, it protects you from shaitan. Prayer is a weapon to confront your enemies. Prayer is what will assist you with the angel of death. Prayer is the light in your grave. Prayer is an answer to Munkar and Nakir. And prayer is what will help you in the grave on the day till the day of judgment. Alhamdulillah, by the grace of Allah, there will be a Secrets of Salat workshop on October 8th and 9th at HIC. It'll be on Saturday from 11 to 3 p.m. and then on Sunday from 3 to 7 p.m. Lunch is included on both days. The workshop is heavily subsidized to make it affordable for all members of the community, and it will be hosted by the Mizan Institute of Dallas, Texas. So they're flying over here to come to Orlando, Florida to teach the workshop. It's going to be taught by Sheikh Mehdi Rastani. He's a very well-respected scholar in the United States. He will be talking about the secret dimensions of Salah. So inshallah, we really hope that as many members of the community can participate. For those who are interested in registering, please see the WhatsApp broadcast or the newsletter to register. There'll be a registration there, link, and a very short form to fill out to register. With that being said, we now continue with the lecture for tonight. Marwaze Bolan Salawat.
الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع لذنوبنا وتبب نفوسنا أبي القاسم محمد والصلاة والسلام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين. وفقنا الله وإياكم بعلم وعمل صالح إن شاء الله، بذكر الصلاة على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أما بعد، فقد قال الله عز وجل في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم: الذين يؤمنون بالغيب ويقيمون الصلاة ومما رزقناهم ينفقون. آمنا بالله. صدق الله العلي العظيم. Respected elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. There is no shadow of a doubt that when it comes to the discussion surrounding the aql, the intellect, the power of reasoning or rationality that has been given and endowed to the human being by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is in fact one of the most powerful forces or one of the most powerful elements that we have associated with our existence. The aql allows us to identify haqq from batil. It allows us to identify good from evil. It allows us to identify truthful or truth from falsehood. And through that, we're able to guide ourselves and seek proximity towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The aql is one of the most profound aspects to our existence. And there is no shadow of a doubt in regards to this concept. When we refer to the ayat of the Holy Quran, when we refer to, for example, the riwayat of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, there is often a reference made to the aql of how it is seen as a standard of guidance. So, for example, Imam Sadiq salawatullahi wasalamuhu alayhi famously comes forward and he says that every single human being has been given hujjatan, has been given two hujjah, and there will be question and they will be questioned on the Day of Judgment with regards to these two hujjah. Hujjatul batiniyya wa hujjatul zahiriyya. Hujjah which is innate, part of their existence, and hujjah which is external from their existence. فَأَمَّا الْحُجَّةُ الظَّاهِرَةُ. As for the external hujjah, proof that he has been given, فَالرُّسُلُ وَالْأَنْبِيَاءُ وَالْأَئِمَّةُ الْأَطْهَارُ. The physical individuals who have been appointed directly by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَأَمَّا هُجَّةُ الْبَاطِنَةِ. As for the innate proof, فَالْعُقُولُ. It says it is the mind of the human being, the intellect or the power of rationality that has been given to that specific individual. In fact, all individuals in this world. When we go on to the discussion surrounding the intellect, you find that when one of the companions came to Imam Sadiq salawatullahi wasalamuhu alayhi and said to him, Yabna Rasulullah, explain to me, what is the intellect upon which the Imam alayhi salam says, the intellect is ma ubida bihir rahman waqtusiba bihil jinan. He says the intellect is that faculty that has been given to the human being. Through it, he worships Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When a person utilizes his intellect, when a person utilizes the power of rationality that has been given to him, naturally this person will find it a necessity to move towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And whenever you come across certain individuals who choose not to utilize their intellect, or they misuse the faculty of rationality, they will move away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In the verse of the Holy Quran that I began the khutbah with, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says very clearly, الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ, that the identity of the believer is that he believes in the unseen. That the physical world that we live in, behind the physical world, there is a hidden reality. Yes? تَبَارَكَ الَّذِي بِيَدِهِ الْمُلْكِ. In his hands is the kingdom. In whose hands? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But then elsewhere in the Holy Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَسُبْحَانَ الَّذِي بِيَدِهِ الْمَلَكُوتِ. In his hands is the mulk, and in his hands is the malakut. Malakut is what? The world of the unseen, the heavens and everything that is associated with the heavens. Anything that is behind this physical material realm, there is a realm that has not that is not something that we have experienced in our lives. And it's something that we will experience after we leave this world. The point being that rationality is not part of the physical world that we live in. Yes, rationality and the power of the intellect, this power of reasoning is not something physical and tangible that we can see. Very interestingly, we live in a day and age where there is this deluge of atheistic, for example, the atheistic movement is very much strong nowadays, and there's a deluge of information that is being poured into our societies, for example. The essence of the atheistic movement, what do they rely upon? They rely upon the idea that everything that exists, everything that can be seen, yes, physically, is what it is. Nothing exists beyond that. The afterlife, there's no evidence to show that there is an afterlife because there's no physical evidence to support it. There is no God because there is no physical evidence to support that there is a God. Because we can't see him, because we can't hear him, therefore he doesn't exist. The worldview that has been established by the atheists nowadays is that if we can't see it, then it does not exist. When you ask them, if that is the case, then how do you prove rationality? Famously, they come forward and they say very, with absolute confidence that a rational person who uses his reasoning, who uses his rationality, will come to the conclusion that there is no God. In fact, it is irrational. It is not rational to believe in the existence of a higher power. And they say it with such confidence. Islam comes forward and says it's the complete opposite. Rationality tells us that there is a God. Common sense tells us that there is a higher power, a higher reality. Yes, the power of reasoning, the power of the intellect tells us that there is a higher existence that has created everything that is around us. When we ask the atheist, how do you prove rationality? Because rationality is not something physical. It's something that is beyond the realm of that which is physical and material. When you ask them, how have we come into existence? They say that we have come into existence through a series of non-rational, through a series of blind sequences of cause and effect. Yes, that has taken part, or that has traversed over millions and millions of years. We are the product and the outcome of a sequence of blind causes and effect. Anything that is physical, number one, is non-rational. Number two is blind. If something is non-rational and blind, how can it give the power of rationality? You see, this is the core of our argument. We as human beings, we are rational. We as human beings, we have the power of reasoning. Not a single human being can deny that we have the power of reason, that we don't have the power of reasoning. Yes? Every single human being accepts the fact that we have the power of reasoning, we have the intellect, we have the power of rationality. Where did this rationality come from? Did it come from the evolution of, for example, different species? A series of accidental causes and effects? How can something that does not possess rationality give rationality? How can something that does not possess something give and distribute that particular thing? I'll give you a very simple example. If I yearn to be affluent and rich, for example, in my life, then I learn from someone who is rich. Yes, it makes sense. If I go to someone who is poor, that poor person will not tell me or teach me how to become rich. Likewise, if I yearn for knowledge, and I yearn to gain knowledge, then I go to someone who is capable of having knowledge, someone who is an alim. If I go to a jahil with the intention of seeking knowledge, the jahil doesn't have ilm to give me ilm. Likewise, if physical products don't have rationality, how can it therefore give rationality? And we have rationality today in this day and age. So you find that the power of rationality is something, it is a gift, it is a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In today's discussion, therefore, what I want to discuss is, having understood that each and every single human being has been given the aql and the power of the aql, does the intellect have any authority within our religion in determining aspects of our theology and in determining certain aspects of our sharia? Does the aql play a role in determining certain theological beliefs? And does it have an authority in determining certain acts which are considered to be wajib or haram or mustahab or even makruh. So let's go into this discussion. It's a very intriguing discussion. It's something that has been discussed by the ulama for many, many centuries. So let's summarize the discussion in tonight's majlis, inshallah. When you look at the discussions of the aql, over the centuries you find that there have been different madhahib within the religion of Islam. Each madhab has had a different outlook as to what exactly the aql is. So when you ask the Ash'arites, for example, the Ash'arites, what is the role of the aql and the authority of the aql? Does the aql have any authority in determining aqeedi perspectives or even jurisprudential aspects of the religion of Islam? The Ash'arites said, leave aside aqaid. When it comes to jurisprudence, when it comes to halal and haram, when it comes to the sharia, the aql has no authority whatsoever. Very interesting. The aql has no authority whatsoever. When you ask them why, they say because the aql does not have the power to understand good and evil. The aql does not have the authority to determine something that is good, nor does it have the power to determine something that is evil. Only Allah has the authority to determine if something is good or to determine something that is evil. Only Allah. Why Allah? Because Allah is the divine lawmaker. Fine, we agree. We not necessarily agree with what they say, but we listen to their arguments. So they came forward and they said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He is the divine lawmaker and He determines what's good and what's evil, whatever He does is ultimately good. Allah never does something that is evil. In fact, Allah cannot do that which is evil. And that's not a limitation on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we say that Allah is incapable of doing evil, it's because there is no reason for Him to perform evil. When I ask you today, for example, that one sin that's part and parcel of your life, why do you commit that sin? You say, well, I know that there are severe ramifications behind me committing certain sins. Yes? There are certain displeasures of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I attract. There are certain bala that I attract because of committing certain sins. In the long run, this particular sin has destroyed my life. But whenever I commit that particular sin, I realize that there is a pleasure behind it. Our vision is often narrow. It's often short-term. Yes, it's very difficult for us to see in the long term and to behave according to the long-term aspects of our behaviors, to behave looking into the long term, for example. We look at the short term, we see that there are immediate pleasures behind it, so we perform that particular sin. There are certain short-term benefits in performing that sin, and those benefits are the pleasures that I derive from committing sins. Can we say the same thing about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Of course not. Allah is needless. Allah does not have certain desires that He needs to accommodate, for example. Yes, Allah is the creator of desires. Allah is the creator of the human beings. We have that shortcoming, not Allah. So the Ash'arites came forward and they said that Allah is incapable of committing evil. Whatever He does is good. So if Allah wants to take, for example, the greatest of Anbiya and place them in the lowest levels of hell, so be it. That action is good. Why? Because His actions are good, number one, and He determines what's good and evil. The aql has no authority in determining what is good and what is evil. If He takes the worst of mankind, the most despicable of characters, Yazid ibn Muawiyah, Iblis, whoever it is, and place them in the highest levels of heaven, so what? Allah determines what's good and what's evil. We disagree with this. We greatly disagree with this. We say, look, observe the ayahs of the Holy Quran. Summun bukmun umyun fahum la ya'qilun. The deaf, the dumb, and the blind, they don't have the power and the capacity to think. Ajib. Allah is saying that there are certain human beings in this world, they don't have the power to use their intellect. Because of the sins that they commit, it hardens their heart. When the heart hardens, they have eyes, but they cannot see. They have ears, but they cannot hear. They cannot see the truth, even if the truth is in front of them. The idea behind this is that these ayats explain to us that the aql is part and parcel of the existence of the human being, and it has some authority. The least of this authority is to determine what is good and what is bad. كَذَلِكَ نُفَصِّلُ الْآيَاتِ لِقَوْمٍ يَعْقِلُونَ. When you ask the Mu'tazilites, the second madhab within the religion of Islam, what's interesting about the Mu'tazilites is that they no longer exist. But there are certain teachings of the Mu'tazilites that have been taken on board by certain contemporary scholars, for example. Not necessarily within our madhab, but certain people within and of course outside of our religion have taken on certain aspects or certain methodologies that were utilized by the Mu'tazilites. So although the actual sect, the Mu'tazilites, no longer exist, their teachings, their knowledge has been taken on board by certain individuals. They resonate very strongly with the madhab of the Mu'tazilites. So the essence is one and the same, but they are just of those who wear a different garment, for example, a different attire. So the Mu'tazilites came forward and they say, we disagree with the Ash'arites. The Ash'arites came forward and said that there is no authority of the Aql. The Mu'tazilites say that the Aql has absolute authority within our Aqidah as well as within our Sharia. The Aql has absolute authority to the maximum level. Halal, haram, yes, good, evil, everything can be discerned and can be ascertained by the Aql. It is determined by the Aql. And this is because of the power of the Aql that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. So you find, for example, when they came and their view is in complete opposition towards the Ash'arites, the other extreme to what the Ash'arites believe, the Mu'tazilites, when they presented their views, our scholars came forward and said, we reject this totally. Why do we reject this? Simply because of the ayah of the Holy Quran. لَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا رُسُلَنَا بِالْبَيِّنَاتِ وَأَنزَلْنَا مَعَهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْمِيزَانَ لِيَقُومَ النَّاسُ بِالْقِسْطِ. Allah says, we sent down messengers with authority. The messengers came towards their people. They presented evidences. They presented proofs to their nabuwah. They presented proofs that they are connected with Alim al-Malakut. They came with a kitab in their hands. They guided people. They established, for example, a just society. When the Mu'tazilites say that the Aql determines every aspect of the religion of Islam, our argument is, what's the need of sending messengers if that's the case? If the Aql can understand good and evil, if the Aql can understand that a person should worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yes, then what's the need of sending messengers? What's the whole purpose and the philosophy behind sending messengers? The whole philosophy behind sending messages is to guide the people into the worship of Allah. But if the Aql is sufficient for a person to turn to Allah, then what reason is there for Allah to send messengers? So we disagreed heavily with regards to the opinions of the Mu'tazilites. Now remember, the Ash'arites believe that the Aql has no authority within the Sharia. The Mu'tazilites believe that the Aql has absolute authority, maximum authority with regards to Aqidah and Sharia. Then you had the madhab of the Ahl al-Bayt alayhim as-salam. The madhab of the Ahl al-Bayt is predominantly the message that was given by Imam Baqir alayhi salam as well as Imam Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam. They came forward and they said that we disagree with these two extreme points. We take the position that is in between. Al-amru bayna al-amrayn. La ifrat wa la tafrit. Al-amru bayna al-amrayn. We take the middle position. What's the middle position? That the Aql has certain authority. Yes, the Aql has certain authority in determining certain theological precepts within our religion, as well as certain ahkami or fiqhi or jurisprudential aspects within this religion as well. So we don't accept the position of the Ash'arites, nor do we accept the positions of the Mu'tazilite. We accept a bit of both, and we base ourselves in between these two extreme positions. Now the question arises, does the Aql have an authority within our theology? Number two, does the Aql have an authority within our Sharia? Let's look at these two individually, one by one. Does the Aql have an authority in determining certain aspects of our Aqidah? Hey, the scholars came forward and said, when we look at our madhab from a holistic perspective, our madhab in terms of our Aqidah can be divided into two sections. Please pay attention to this because many people get confused with these two ideas. And misinformation, unfortunately, is spread simply because of the misunderstandings between these two sections or these two categories within our Aqidah. Aqidah can be separated into two categories. Number one, which is known as Usul al-Ma'arif, and the second, which is known as Furu' al-Ma'arif. Usul al-Ma'arif are the essential aspects within the religion of Islam. For a person to be identified as a Muslim, he needs to believe in the Usul al-Ma'arif, which is known as the Usul al-Din. The identity of a Muslim is known by his belief in the tenets of the religion of Islam. So there are five. Yes, simply put, there are five. There is Tawheed, there is Adala. Adala is the extension of Tawheed. Then there is the belief in Nabuwa. Then there is the belief in Imama. Imama is the extension of Nabuwa. And of course, there is the belief of the Day of Judgment. So when you come down to it, there are three: Tawheed, Nabuwa, and the Day of Resurrection. If a person believes in these three, formally, he is identified as a Muslim. Never will you find a Muslim who comes forward and says, look, I believe in Tawheed, but I don't believe in Nabuwa. So you're not considered to be Muslim. Yes? There's no Islam for you. You believe in Allah, but you don't believe in His Prophet. Well, I believe in Allah, I believe in the Prophet, but I don't believe in the Day of Resurrection. Again, you're not considered to be a Muslim. You are now officially outside the folds of Islam. These are with regards to Usul al-Ma'arif. Then you have something which is known as Furu' al-Ma'arif. Furu' al-Ma'arif are those aqeedi elements, theological discussions which are outside of these three or five. Yes, and there are many. I'll come to these discussions in a few moments. Coming back to the question, does the aql have an authority in our aqidah? Our scholars came forward and said, when it comes to usul al-ma'arif, absolutely. When it comes to furu' al-ma'arif, the aql has very limited authority. So let me give you a few examples. When it comes to Tawheed, Tawheed is essential within our religion. The belief in one God, the belief that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all powerful, yes, the all being, has lived, has existed eternally, yes, has never come into existence. All of this can be determined by the aql. In fact, it has to be determined by the aql. If I ask you a question, if for example a person came and asked you a question, you as a Muslim, why do you believe that there is one God? And you say, well, I believe in one God because the Quran says, Qul huwallahu ahad. This argument is batil. Yes, when the question is raised, why do you believe in one God? And you say, well, the Quran says to believe in one God. You're referring to the Quran, which depends on the belief in one God. The argument is batil. Yes, the reason being is because you're referring to texts to prove your religion, to prove your identity as a Muslim, whereas the responsibility is that you should refer to your aql, your logic, your common sense, your power of rationality, the power of reasoning that has been endowed to you should make you believe that there is one God. So when you have, for example, all of these different riwayat speaking about Tawheed, the best sermon, for example, that you can refer to in regards to Tawheed is the first sermon of Nahjul Balagha of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. When he begins to dissect the different elements of Tawheed, you realize that we shouldn't be referring to a hadith nor Quran to prove or to believe in the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Riwayat, Quran, this reinforces our belief. But the fundamentals of the belief in Tawheed should emanate from the aql. Beautifully, they say there is one scholar from the madhab of our brothers, may Allah bless them. He came forward after reading Nahjul Balagha. He says there is no shadow of a doubt that this sermon that has been mentioned or attributed to Ali ibn Abi Talib, he says, I don't believe it's from Ali ibn Abi Talib. They asked him, why? Why don't you believe it's from Ali ibn Abi Talib? He says, because the profundity in the concepts of Tawheed that has been demonstrated in the sermon specifically, he says the Muslims at that time, they were the first generations of Muslims. Yes, no one had that in-depth knowledge with regards to Tawheed. The science of Tawheed, the science of the religion of Islam, certain knowledge with regards to the religion of Islam evolved and developed over time. It developed over time. Just like, for example, medicine. Medicine evolved over time until what we have today. Likewise, certain aspects of our theology has evolved over time. He came forward and he said, it is impossible that these words emanated from Ali ibn Abi Talib, simply because he was one of the first generations of Muslims. The Muslims hadn't evolved intellectually at that time to be able to speak about Tawheed in such a way. Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, when he begins to speak about Tawheed, it is not that we refer to his words to believe in Allah. His words simply reinforce our belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Famous story, hadith, or a particular event that takes place in the life of Abu Dharr al-Ghafari. They say Abu Dharr al-Ghafari, famously one day in his own tribe, before coming towards the religion of Islam, one of his jobs was to protect the idols in the temple. This was one of the gods. He says, I was on duty one day, and all of a sudden I saw people coming towards these idols, and they began to distribute food, milk, yogurt, and all of these different things to give to the idols. He said that as I was standing there, people came, they prayed, and they left. They left the food. All of a sudden, I saw a fox enter the temple. They came towards, the fox came towards this big idol, Al-Manat, I believe it was, and it began to drink from the milk. Ajib. After it drank, after it ate some of the food, it turned to the idol and it began urinating on the idol. He said, when I saw this, he says, when I saw this, I began to think, how can this idol be a deity? How can it be a god? It's not capable of protecting itself. It's not capable of protecting its food. And not only that, it was humiliated by an animal. How can I rely upon a statue to protect me? You ask a 4-year-old, for example, that there are people who worship idols. There are people who talk to idols. The 4-year-old will say to you, well, hold on a second. Can it talk back? Can the idol talk back? Can the idol hear your words? How can people rely on an idol when an idol cannot move? Naturally, you find children believe in a higher power that is not subdued, that is not constrained by, for example, the limitations of an idol. So you find that Abu Dharr al-Ghafari, simply by witnessing a particular incident, came and he said to himself that no, there has to be a higher reality behind the belief of idols. And then he goes towards the city of Mecca, and he meets with Amir al-Mu'mineen, and of course he meets with the Holy Prophet of Islam. He came towards the religion of Islam simply using his aql. And it's not like he was jumping hoops, for example, trying to believe and seek evidences in the belief of a higher power. Something very simple. When a fox urinated on an idol, it triggered certain questions for him, and with the right intention, he met the Holy Prophet of Islam. When it comes to Nabuwa, likewise, Nabuwa is something that is proven by the aql. We ask the question, I believe in Tawheed. I believe that there is a higher existence. I believe that Allah is Hakim, all wise, and Allah is Alim, all knowledgeable. He's created me. What's the purpose of my creation? Has Allah created me, left me in this world without guidance, without any purpose? No, there is a purpose. What's that purpose? That purpose is to turn to Him and to worship Him. Yes, that purpose is to turn to Him and shukr. That purpose is to turn to Him and seek proximity towards Him, to seek an association, to seek a relationship with Him. How do I seek a relationship with Him? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends down prophets to help mankind connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Prophets were sent to people to allow the people to understand and to teach the people how to communicate with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the philosophy behind Nabuwa. That's the philosophy behind prophethood. Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam, I say to you, Nabi Ibrahim was pulling his hair when he spoke to his uncle Azar, when he began speaking to the priests of his time. Can you imagine how irritating it would have been for Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam when he was speaking such simple language to them and they were not willing to listen to him? They say one day he came towards his uncle. He said to his uncle, why do you believe in idols that cannot see you, that cannot hear you, that cannot respond to you, that cannot even move towards you, that cannot even protect you? How can you speak to idols that cannot do any of these things, and for you to consider this idol to be a deity? He says, my uncle, let me ask you something. He says, the food that you provide to this particular idol, yes, the halawiyat, the halwa, for example, that we see people providing for their idols, the milk, the yogurt, all of these things that you provide for the idol. The way you worship this idol, you get on your knees, you place your arm this way, that way, you say or you chant certain words. He says, my uncle, I have one question for you. How do you know that this is the way you're supposed to worship the idol? Has the idol told you that he wants to be worshipped in this particular way? Huh? He says, what if the idol does not like the food that you're providing it? What if the idol, for example, does not appreciate the way you're worshipping it? You know, sometimes as human beings, what we do is that we worship God based on or according to our own standards. When we go for a job interview, we walk into the employer's office as an employee or potential employee who conducts the interview. And according to whose standards is the interview conducted? According to my standards or according to the standards of the employer? It's according to the standards of the employer. Likewise, Allah, when He demands worship from us, مَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ, it's not that I turn to Allah and worship Him the way I want to worship Him. It has to be based according to His standards. How do I know what His standards are? He sends down messengers to guide me, to teach me how Allah ought to be worshipped. I worship Allah based and according to His standards, not according to my own standards. Then we move on to the idea of ma'ad. The idea that one day each and every single human being will return. Our ulama unanimously accept the idea that the returning of the human being, the resurrection of the human being, is something that is logical. Logical. So what do you mean it's logical? How can you prove ma'ad? Ma'ad is one of the greatest manifestations of the justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is no concept greater than the justice of Allah than the concept of the return. Why? Why do I say this? There are people in this world, they are criminals and the worst of criminals. Deviants when it comes to their actions. They've killed and slaughtered thousands upon thousands. In the end of their lives, yes, they've had an easy death. You look at the likes of Saddam Hussein, the one who slaughtered the greatest of our ulama, the one who slaughtered hundreds of thousands, Hajjaj ibn Yusuf al-Thaqafi, for example, the likes of Umar ibn Sa'ad, the likes of Hitler, they slaughtered Stalin, they slaughtered millions, yes, between them. And in the final moments of their lives, some of them committed suicide, they took the easy way out, they never saw justice in this world. Allah says, no, they didn't see justice in this world, but they will see justice in the hereafter. The famous example that I like to give is the 14-year-old Pakistani who saved an entire school by sacrificing his life when he saw a threat coming towards that particular school. When that suicide bomber was on his way to that school, this young man, this youth jumped forward, stopped the bomber himself. And of course the bomb was triggered and he saved countless lives. All of those children who are in the school, their lives were saved simply because he, for example, gave and sacrificed his own life. I ask you a question, how should this person be rewarded? He will never be rewarded in this dunya because why? He's no longer part of dunya. But that reward will come in the hereafter. The hereafter is a plane of judgment where the manifestation of Allah's justice will be seen. Allah says this beautifully in the Holy Quran. He asks rhetorical questions. Such simple yet rhetorical questions. He says, أَفَنَجْعَلُ الْمُسْلِمِينَ كَالْمُجْرِمِينَ? Do you think that the Muslims, those who submitted to the religion of Islam, will be like the criminals? مَا لَكُمْ كَيْفَ تَحْكُمُونَ? He says, what's wrong with you? Is this how you judge? That the greatest worshippers and the greatest deviants, the greatest of criminals, when they leave their lives, when they leave dunya, their end is exactly the same, entering nothingness, entering blackness? Says, no, there is a reality behind this life. And they will be judged according to their actions in this world. أَمْ نَجْعَلُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ كَالْمُفْسِدِينَ? He says, do you think we will make the greatest of believers who believed and they performed good actions like those who caused fasad in this world? فِي الْأَرْضِ أَمْ نَجْعَلُ الْمُتَّقِينَ كَالْفُجَّارِ? And do you think that we will make those who had taqwa in their lives, those who submitted to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like the fujjar who caused fasad and fitna in this world? The greatest of believers and the greatest of deviants, what their end will be the exact same? So here you find that the aql comes forward and explains that yes, the return is something that is logical, it's something that is Actually, it makes sense. So when it comes to usul al-ma'arif, our scholars and ulama came forward and said that our aql should be the absolute authority in determining all of these three aspects: tawheed, nabuwa, and ma'ad. When you therefore come towards furu' al-ma'arif, unanimously our scholars came forward and said that our aql has very limited capacity in understanding furu' al-ma'arif. Furu' al-ma'arif includes what? It includes, for example, ilm al-ghayb, that the a'immat al-athhar have knowledge of the unseen. Can you and I use our aql to prove this? No, we can't. Our aql has no role, has no authority in determining the whole idea and the concept of ilm al-ghayb. Ilm al-ghayb is something that is proven from the Quran and from the riwayat. We refer to textual sources. Likewise, when it comes to tahrif al-Quran, that the Quran has been tampered with, do we use our aql? No. We use the sources that we have to either prove or disprove. Then we have, for example, alim al-dhar, alim al-anwar, the world of the particles, the world that existed before our existence in dunya. Can we use our aql to believe, to prove this or disprove this? No, we can't. Or for example, the idea of raja', that the best of human beings and the worst of human beings will be resurrected just before the coming of the 12th Holy Imam Ajjalallahu Ta'ala Farajahu Sharif. Can we use the aql? No, we can't use the aql. We use textual sources to prove all of these things. Therefore, our scholars came forward and said, you will find differences of opinions with regards to all of these aspects. Wilayat takwiniya being amongst them, that the imams have the power and the authority to perform miracles and change certain physicalities in this world. The ulama came forward and said, from one alim to another, you'll have different responses, you'll have different beliefs. You'll have one alim who doesn't believe in the extent of ilm al-ghayb. You'll have one alim who doesn't believe, for example, in the idea of alim al-dhar. He will philosophize the concept of alim al-dhar. You'll have one alim who doesn't believe in raja'a. You'll have one alim who vehemently believes in raja'a. And he believes in, for example, the aspects of ilm al-ghayb. If a person chooses not to believe in the furu' al-ma'arif, it does not make him fall outside of the religion of Islam. Yes, there are many times, you'll find that the alim may have used, for example, certain traditions or certain sources which may have not come or may have not been, for example, authentic. His istinbat, his derivation of certain conclusions, him reaching certain conclusions may have not been correct. And other ulamas may have challenged him in their ideas, and so on and so forth. But the point is if people have different ideas and different beliefs in these areas of our theology, they do not fall outside of the religion of Islam. A person only falls outside of the religion of Islam is if he does not believe in usul al-ma'arif. So when it comes to the areas of, or when it comes to the question, does our aql have authority in aqa'id? Our scholars said when it comes to usul al-ma'arif, absolutely. When it comes to furu' al-ma'arif, no, it's not important. We have more authority is given to textual sources, and our aql has no authority in these areas. Then you come towards the idea of ahkam. Does our intellect, our aql, have any authority in determining certain rules within our jurisprudence or no? So here the scholars came forward and they said yes. But the power and the authority of the aql is mahdood, is limited. There are certain laws which are established simply by the aql. So for example, let me give you one example. There are certain laws which are considered to be mustaqallat al-aqliyah. The aql alone will determine whether it's wajib or whether it's haram. We don't need Allah to tell us that these things are wajib. We don't need the Holy Prophet or Imam Sadiq alayhi salam to tell us that there are certain things which are considered to be wajib. Our aql comes to that conclusion alone. For example, saying the truth. Saying the truth, we don't need the Imam to tell me that saying the truth is wajib, that lying is haram, that justice is good, that oppression is evil, that stealing from the people is wrong. Yes? That, for example, giving sadaqah, supporting the weak, supporting the orphans, supporting, for example, the strangers is part and parcel of the religion of Islam. My aql comes to these conclusions. I don't need the Ahl al-Bayt or the authorities in the religion of Islam to tell me to behave in such a way. My aql alone is sufficient. This is known as mustaqallat al-aqliya. Then you have something which is known as mulazimat al-aqliya. Mulazimat al-aqliya meaning that you have an action which is wajib. Any action that is associated with this action which is wajib also become wajib. So let me give you a couple of examples. Salah. Salah is wajib. Anything that acts as a precursor or a preamble to that salah also becomes wajib. So when I go and I perform ghusl or wudu or tayammum, whichever way I perform tahara, that tahara also becomes wajib. Why? Because it's seen as a precursor, as a preamble to the act of salah. Likewise, hajj. Hajj, for those who haven't been hajj, is wajib, especially if it's the first time. Financially, I have the means to go for hajj. I've taken time off. I have the qudra, the energy. I'm fit. I can go for hajj. Hajj has now become wajib for me. I go for hajj. That requires me to buy my ticket. That requires me to travel. That requires me to organize a hotel. That requires me to take time off from work. That requires me to do all different things. All of these things are considered to be wajib because they all act as a precursor, as a preamble towards the act of hajj itself. Any introductory actions that lead to that action which is wajib are also considered to be wajib. So these two, mustaqallat al-aqliya and mulazimat al-aqliya, yes, the aql has authority to determine that there are certain aspects within our sharia. The aql has the authority to determine certain aspects of our sharia, whether it's halal or haram. Outside of these two, the scholars say that the aql has no authority whatsoever. Again, the power of the aql is mahdud, is limited. Now a question arises, can we understand the philosophy behind certain rulings or no? Can the aql allow me to understand the philosophy as to why certain rulings exist or no? We say yes. The aql, again, we say the aql does have the authority to understand the philosophy as to why certain rulings exist. But that authority is limited again. There are some laws within this religion, we can understand why they exist. When you talk about lying, for example, lying is haram. The aql tells me that it's haram. When you say, why is lying haram? Because it causes distrust within the community. It causes misinformation. It breaks the fabrics of society. Why is charity good? Charity brings about unity. Charity brings about empathy. Charity brings about, for example, the strengthening of the community. Why is justice good? Again, it strengthens society. Why is oppression evil? Because you're taking the rights away from people. Yes, you are belittling the people. Why is arrogance haram? Why is jealousy haram? Because these are vices of the human body, yes, of the human being. These are not considered to be virtues. When you come towards this perspective, you realize that the aql is able to philosophize, is able to understand as to why certain rulings exist. But for the majority of other rulings that exist within this religion, the aql has no authority in trying to understand as to why they exist. Therefore, we refer to, for example, the Quran. The Quran tells us as to why certain laws exist, why salah exists. Why do I pray 3? Why do I pray 4, for example? The aql is not able to understand this. The Quran tells me the philosophy behind salah. Yes, the Quran tells me the philosophy behind zakat. The Quran tells me the philosophy behind hajj. The Quran tells me the philosophy behind the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The aql is not able to tell me these things. Sometimes I need to refer to the riwayat of the Ahl al-Bayt alayhim salam to teach me and explain to me as to why certain laws exist. The famous khutbah of the Holy Lady Fatima Zahra alayhi salam, khutbah al-Fadakiyya, you find in the introductory phrases she begins to speak about the philosophy behind certain actions, the philosophy behind zakat, the philosophy behind salah, the philosophy behind hajj, and so on and so forth. The authority of this religion, who are the Ahl al-Bayt, they help us understand and give certain reasoning as to why certain laws exist. At times, no, we don't have to refer to the Quran. We don't refer to the Ahl al-Bayt. Sometimes we refer to science. Science and the progression of science, the advancement of technology allows us to understand why certain rulings exist. For example, the consumption of pork. The consumption of pork. The consumption of pork, when a person consumes pork, yes, when you starve a pig for a few days, and whatever you give to it, it will eat and consume it. Even if it's the most vilest of things, even if it's the flesh of a human being, the pork will consume it. Hence the famous phrase, as greedy as a pig. When the human being consumes, for example, the pig, then you find that all of the illnesses that are there in the pig will be transferred to the human being. Science tells us this. 1400 years ago, people weren't able to understand as to why the flesh of swine was made haram. Yes? Likewise, you find that science has the ability to help us understand and give reasoning to why certain rulings exist. But for the major part of our ahkam and our sharia, the aql, the Quran, the riwayat, nor even science has the ability to explain why, or does not even explain why these rulings exist. What's our maqam here? What's our position here? For example, when it comes to halal and haram, when it comes to halal meat, yes, I can give you 2 plates of food. Exactly the same, cooked by the same chef. They look exactly the same, they weigh exactly the same, yes, 2 pieces of steak, for example. They even taste the same, except one is halal and the other is haram. What's the difference between the two? Why is it that halal is something that has been ascertained and determined within this religion, and haram is something that is not part of this religion? Why is it that the animal has to be slaughtered in a particular way? We don't know. This is not part of our wisdom. This is not part of our aql. But then we say to ourselves that yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is all wise and He is all knowledgeable. When He determines certain ruling for me, it's okay for me to come forward and say, Ya Allah, my knowledge is limited. My knowledge is limited. And I know that your knowledge is far greater than mine. It's okay if I come forward and I say that I trust you in the decisions that you've made for me. So when it comes to the power and the authority of the aql, we can understand as to why certain rulings exist. We can philosophize why certain rulings exist, but only to a limited scale. Our aql is limited, therefore our understanding of the sharia is limited. So not only can our aql determine certain laws within the religion of Islam to a limited capacity, but we can understand certain laws and why they exist to a limited capacity as well. Famously, Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam comes forward and he says, Inna ad-deen Allah, indeed the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala la yusabu bil uqul al-naqisa, can never be understood by a deficient aql. You and I, we have deficient aql. We have a deficient intellect. Our intellect by far is not perfect. وَالْآرَاءِ الْبَاطِلَةِ, and by invalid opinions. I have one opinion, you have another opinion. We all have differences of opinions. The religion of Islam can never be understood by you and my opinion. It has to be understood by the opinions of those who are the representatives of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَالْمَقَايِيسَ الْفَاسِدَةِ, yes, and by making analogies and so on and so forth. That was quite predominant in the time of Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam. Imam al-Hussein salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. Imam al-Hussein salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi in the city of Medina. When he was there in the city of Medina, they say that Walid, the governor of Medina, immediately summons him. He says, give bay'ah to Yazid. He says, that's not going to happen. He says, then Yazid has ordered for your execution. In that conversation, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam says to Walid, he says, Inna nahnu ahla bayt al-nubuwa. Inna ahla bayt al-nubuwa. We are from the family of prophethood. Wa ma'adin al-risala. We are those whom the message was given to. It is within our household that the message of Islam was revealed. We grew up in the midst of revelation. وَمَعْدِنَ الرِّسَالَةِ وَمُخْتَلَفِ الْمَلَائِكَةِ, and we are the ones whom the angels came and visited. Today you find youths are asking questions. How do you know as a Shia that your madhab is correct? We say to them, because when it comes to akhlaq, when it comes to aqaid, when it comes to fiqh, our sources are one and the same, and they are the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. I want to understand how to worship Allah, Ahlul Bayt. I want to understand and gain a greater understanding of Tawheed, Ahlul Bayt. Gain a greater understanding of Nabuwah, Ahlul Bayt. To understand Ma'ad and how and what will transpire after I leave this world, the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. With the other madahib, they have separate scholars when it comes to fiqh. They have separate scholars when they come to aqaid. They have separate scholars when it comes to irfan, when it comes to akhlaq. Our madhab, the Ahlul Bayt, always come first. In our madhab, the sources of our religion, in every dimension, are the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. It says, نحن أهل بيت النبوة ومعدن الرسالة ومختلف الملائكة. فتح الله بنا. Allah had created creation through us. وختم الله بنا. And Allah will cease creation through us. We are the first to come into existence, and we will be last, or the last ones to exist, when everything will cease to exist, when everything will fall into the plains of annihilation. How beautiful is this hadith? The Ahlul Bayt were the perfect manifestations of the intellect. The greatest levels of the intellect were given to the Ahlul Bayt. They were the practical embodiment of the perfect intellect. And look how their bodies were treated on the 10th of Muharram. When you have a young girl who came out of her tent, when the tents were burning, she came out running of her tent. And they say that she was in the state of shock. Imagine Sukaina, imagine Ruqayya, how little they were, how young they were, when they saw their tents being burned, their homes being burned, their clothes and their jewelry and their belongings being plundered by the enemies of the Ahlul Bayt. They say that this young girl began walking in the sands of Karbala. Hamid ibn Muslim narrates, he says, I saw this young girl, so I came towards her and I said to her, "O young girl, tell me, where are you going? Where is it that you want to go?" She responded, she said, "Ya Shaykh, take me towards the lands of Najaf." He says, I was shocked when I heard this. The lands of Najaf, that's very far. What's there in the lands of Najaf? She said, I heard my aunt Zainab say one day that whosoever goes towards the lands of Najaf, there is a grave there, the grave of her father, Amir al-Mu'mineen. If a person has any mushkila, any problem in their lives, let them come towards this grave. Let them pour their hearts out towards this grave, and Allah will allow them to see a solution, to see an answer come from this grave. She came forward and she said, Ya Hamid, Ya Sheikh, take me towards the lands of Najaf. I want to complain to this person, to my grandfather, what they did to us on this day. How they took away my uncle and my brothers, how they slaughtered my infant brother, how they took away my father from me. I want to complain to this person in this grave. Hamid, he responds, he says, but I cannot take you to Najaf. Najaf is very far. Is there somewhere else that I can take you? This young girl, she says to him, Ya Shaykh, then take me towards the Furat, take me towards the water, the river. He says, come with me, follow me, young child. She goes towards the Furat. When she nears the Furat, when she comes near, what does she see? She sees the body of Abu Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salam. When she approaches the body of her uncle, she jumps on her body, she embraces the body of her uncle, she cries and she weeps tears. She says, oh my uncle, look what they did to us after you left us. In the dungeons of Sham, in the prisons of Sham. They say this young girl, she wakes up from her sleep in the middle of the night. She cries out to her aunt, Ya Ammati Zainab, oh my aunt Zainab, I wish to see my father. I want to see my father. I want to see my father. Imagine, what can you say to a young girl at that time when she's witnessed the slaughter and the execution of her father, when she saw the head of her father being paraded from one city to another, from when they were dragged towards Kufa, and from Kufa to Sham, all she saw was the head of her father on top of the spears. What can you say to this young girl? When she began to cry, the sounds reach Yazid. He wakes up from his sleep. He says to his guards, what is it that she wants? They say to her that she's asking for her father. She wants to see her father. Yazid says to them, then give her the head of her father. The guards, they took the head of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam, they placed it on a plate and they covered the plate. Then they came towards Sakina. When they came towards Sakina, Sakina saw the guards coming towards them, coming towards her. When she saw them coming towards her with a plate in their hands, she turns to her aunt Zainab. She says, oh my aunt, I'm not hungry. I didn't ask for food. I asked for my father. I want to see my father. When they gave her the plate, when she lifted the lid from the plate, she saw the head of her father covered in blood. His beard was covered and drenched in his blood. They say she embraces the head of her father. She begins to caress his head. Wa abata, wa abata. She begins to cry and lament. Then all of a sudden, she falls into deep silence. Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam then turns to Zainab. She says, oh my aunt Zainab, take my sister from the head of our father. Yabna Rasulullah, why? Oh my aunt Zainab, she's no longer with us. They say that when Zainab came towards Sukaina, when she moved the body of Sukaina, she saw that her body is lifeless. When Zainab goes back towards the city of Karbala, the poets, they say that when she came towards the grave of Abu Abdullah, she converses with her brother. She says, you left me with an amana. You trusted me to look after the women and the children. But Ya Abu Abdullah, Ya Akhi, she died in the streets, in the dungeons of Sham, and I had to bury her in Sham. Forgive me, my brother, for she died in my care. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Sayalamu alladhina zalamu ayya munqalabin yanqalibun. Rahimallahu man qara'a surat al-Fatiha.
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya मजलूम का कुनबा जब शाम को पहुँचा आबिद का था नौहा लो आ गया बाजार मेरी फूफी अम्मा रोती है बेपर्दा लाखों का है मजमा लो आ गया बाजार मजलूम का कुनबा जब शाम को पहुँचा आबिद का था नौहा लो आ गया बाजार ये सोच के रोता हूँ माँ बहन खुले सर है किस तरह से देखूंगा سامنے منظر ہے نیزے پہ ہے ایک سر روتا ہے جو اکثر کرتا ہے جو نوحہ لو آ گیا بازار مظلوم کا کنبہ جب شام کو پہنچا عابد کا تھا نوحہ بازو ہے بندے میرے میں کچھ نہیں کر سکتا بوچار ہے پتھر کی ہم سب ہے رسن بستا ہے خون کا دریا جو سر سے ہے بہتا ہنستے ہیں یہ اعداء لو آ گیا بازار مظلوم کا کنبہ جب شام کو پہنچا عابد کا تھا نوحہ ہر ایک قدم بابا قرآن سناتے ہیں اور آگ کے پتھر خود چہرے پہ وہ کھاتے ہیں زہرا کا دلارا احمد کا نواسا ہے برے سر لہزا لو آ گیا بازار مظلوم کا کنبہ جب شام کو پہنچا عابد کا تھا نوحہ اور شمر یہ عابد سے کس فخر سے کہتا ہے پردہ تیری زینب کا نیزے سے اتارا ہے قوت ہے یہ میری احمد کی نواسی کو شام میں لایا لو آ گیا بازار مظلوم کا کنبہ جب شام کو پہنچا عابد کا تھا نوحہ لو آ گیا بازار وہ ننھی سکینہ کو مانگا ہے کنیزی میں مرتا ہوں جیتے جی ماحول شرابی میں گھبراتی ہے بچی اور ہو کے میں بھائی کچھ کر نہیں سکتا لو آ گیا بازار مظلوم کا کنبہ جب شام کو پہنچا عابد کا تھا نوحہ مولا کو مدینے میں ایک شخص نے جب پوچھا جب سب سے مصیبت تھی وہ کون سا منظر تھا مولا کہے رو کر دل سوز تھا منظر نظروں میں جو چھایا لو آ گیا بازار مظلوم کا کنبہ جب شام کو پہنچا عابد کا تھا نوحہ لو آ گیا بازار میری پھوپھی اماں روتی ہے بے پردہ لاکھوں کا ہے مجمع لو آ گیا بازار، مظلوم کا کنبہ جب شام کو پہنچا عابد کا تھا نوحہ لو آ گیا بازار یا حسین 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 رحم اللہ من قرأ الفاتحہ.
بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم. السلام علیکہ یا رسول اللہ. السلام علیکہ یا رسول اللہ. السلام علیکہ یا امیر المؤمنین. السلام علیکہ یا فاطمۃ الزہراء. السلام علیکہ یا خدیجۃ الکبریٰ. السلام علیکہ یا حسن المجتبیٰ. السلام علیکہ یا ابا عبداللہ الحسین وعلی تسعۃ المعصومین من ذریتک علی بن الحسین و محمد بن علی و جعفر بن محمد و موسیٰ بن جعفر و علی بن موسیٰ و محمد بن علی و علی بن محمد والحسن بن علی والحجت بن الحسن عجل اللہ فرجہ و سہل اللہ مخرجہ و ظہورہ. السلام علیکم ورحمۃ اللہ وبرکاتہ. اللہم صلی علی اللہم کل ولیک حجت ابن الحسن صلواتک علیہ وعلی آبائہ فی ہذہ الساعۃ وفی کل ساعہ ولیا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودلیلا وعینا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.
اللهم صل على